Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about what to say to people who, when you point out that Twitter, for example, is censoring people, they go, hey, but Twitter's just a private company. It's not the federal government, and the First Amendment only applies to the federal government. So what do you say in those circumstances? Well, the first thing that you should say, there's really 5 things that you can say, and the first is like, you're the kind of person that, in fact, never showed any interest in defending private companies at all. You're the kind of person that was for shutting down companies and locking down people, and you've never shown any respect for private companies at all. So how is it the case that now, only now, you have respect for private companies, gigantic big tech companies who are engaging in censorship? Why is this your only case where you have an interest in the rights of private companies? That'd be the first response, a consistency issue. A second issue is that private companies, they may have these terms of service, but really they're constantly engaging in implicit contracts. Jack, former CEO of Twitter, and their verbiage all the time is a public square-like verbiage, free expression-friendly verbiage. They've been giving that verbiage for nigh on 15 years. And so there's this implicit idea that you've built a life there, just as you've built, as we've talked about in a previous Science Moment, you've built a life in your apartment complex, your condo, and the HOA after 10 years suddenly says, oh, and by the way, we're no longer allowing you to talk about certain kinds of things in the public space down, let's say where the pool is. You can't talk about certain kinds of things. And it was in the terms of service. No, the implicit contract is that you are allowed to say whatever you want. In fact, it was packaged up that way and should be presumed that way unless it's specifically said otherwise. So I think there's a strong case to be made that was the implicit, declared contract, in fact, that they would often point to. A third is that, and this is something I've argued, and I want to get too detailed into this today, is that even as a libertarian, I think there's a strong case to be made that discrimination on the basis of sex, race, sexual orientation, age, and so forth, but should be prevented, made to be illegal in public accommodations of all kinds, but also political position. The entire point of a public accommodation is that one shouldn't have to check oneself. Hey, are they as Whole Foods today accepting folks with my political position? That's not something one should have to worry about, and it's consistent with libertarianism for reasons I've talked about before. Basically, you can always opt out. You can choose to be a private club. It's one of the first things libertarians would do, to have a public accommodations where anybody can go to any of these with no questions asked. These places like Twitter and Facebook are public accommodations. They should be under the same. They should treat political position and of course fact status and things like this as a protected class, in the sense that just anybody should be allowed to go at any time. Now, a fourth issue here is that this isn't, in fact, just private censorship. This has been coordinated by the federal government, who proudly admits coordinating with social media, coordinating with big tech social media to ensure that mainstream narrative messages are enforced and augmented and amplified, whereas anti-mainstream narrative messages are pushed down. They've explicitly said this. This is what our lawsuit, Changizi versus the Health and Human Services, is about, that it's actually the federal government coordinating these things. And they've admitted, and there's been now leaks and FOIA requests that have led to emails between the federal government and Twitter showing that they're in fact coordinating. This isn't even private censorship at all. This is the federal government, and thus directly violating the First Amendment. But even if it really was just Twitter doing it, the most important reaction that one should have in these conversations, when you hear someone saying, hey, Twitter, just censored me, or censored this, or censored someone, or suspended somebody, the reaction of anybody who's rational and anybody who's not just politically trying to score points is not to say, well, they're a private company, they can do whatever they want. The real answer is to say, Twitter shouldn't be doing this. This is not good. The real answer is to encourage Twitter and social media generally to respect free expression. Not to say they have a right to be dicks. Okay, we all get that they have the right to be dicks. I mean, it's more nuanced than that. I actually think that they may not have that right. But that's not the point of these conversations. If you have a respect for free expression and for civil liberties in general and for open discussion in the public square, then your response should always be, well, that's awful. That's awful that Twitter and Facebook are doing this and that YouTube is doing this. They need to change. We need to push them to change. And I think they should be ashamed that they're engaged in that kind of behavior. Sure, maybe they have the right to do it, you could say, but that's shameful that they're doing that. Where are the people that are saying this on the other side? Where are they? They're not saying that. And the reason they're not saying that is because the censorship happens to be going in their favored direction. And that makes it shameful on them for having that attitude. Right? If it ever turns around that the censorship was going the other way on any other platform, if you are on the side of free expression now, pushing back on this kind of censorship, make sure that you're on the side of free expression then. That kind of inconsistency is itself shameful. And that was your science moment. Go give a look to our research institute, Free Expression, the FreeX group, freex.group, where we study free expression. We study the emergent dynamics of large-scale networks, how they fail, how they do well, how they slowly move towards the truth when free expression is up and running, and how they tend to veer off and go off the tracks when censorship is up and running, as they have for the last 2.5 years. And also get yourself a copy of Dr. Tim Barber and my new book, Expressly Human, on the foundations of emotional expressions, why we have them, what it is that masks cover, and the foundations of free expression itself. And that was your science moment.